Friends, hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where two writers sit down and have exactly that, a conversation between two writers. We'll talk about craft, we'll talk about the creative journey, we'll talk about the highs and lows of publishing, wherever the conversation takes us. I usually don't write any questions down ahead of time, so it's just who knows where it's going to go, but usually it's a pretty damn good conversation. And that was certainly the case with today. Before I get to today's guest, just a note, if you're looking for any help with your writing through my company, Unbound Writer, I do coaching, one-on-one coaching and mentoring with writers. We also offer self-guided online courses and writing retreats and workshops. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, you can check me out at unboundwriter.com. And if you're interested specifically in coaching, you have the ability on the website to book a free call with me where we can just talk face-to-face and just see what you are looking to achieve and seeing if we might be a good fit for each other. All right, so today on the show, I had Amy Meyerson. So Amy is the acclaimed author of the international bestselling The Bookshop of Yesterdays, The Imperfects, and The Love Scribe. And her books have been translated into over 11 languages and has been featured in a lot of different news sites and periodicals. And she has just written her first work of psychological suspense called The Water Lies, which was published just this past January 1st from Thomas and Mercer. So Amy and I were talking, and she's, you could tell from the beginning, from her first words, she's been writing, wanting to be a writer since she was a kid, self-proclaimed writing really before she was even doing much reading. And, that translated into her, not only writing multiple novels, but also teaching writing in various forms at the University of Southern California, where she works obviously in the writing department. And so because she's got such a great perspective on writing, we were able to talk not only about her own journey and the way that she views fiction and kind of the leap from writing, what she describes as maybe women's fiction to psychological suspense. But we also got the perspective of teaching writing and obviously the low-hanging fruit conversation topic of talking about, the influence of AI. And she had a couple interesting things to say about that. And how that even influences kind of how she perceives writing in general. So it was a great conversation. I feel like I learned a lot from it. She had a lot of good tips on how she approaches craft, the importance of workshopping your manuscripts, the importance of learning who to listen to if you do that kind of a thing. So if you're an aspiring writer, this is a conversation not only with somebody who's written several novels, but teaches it as well. So there's a lot of good nuggets to mine in this conversation. This is my fantastic discussion with Amy Meyerson. So I'm assuming from your bio that you live, unless you teach remotely, that you live in Southern California.
I do. Yes.
Whereabouts? Are you in LA?
Well, right now, as I was saying before, I'm like in my very spare office at USC that I don't use. Well, some semesters I use it, but I don't generally use it that much. But we live in Pasadena.
Okay. Yeah. I grew up in,
Oh, your dog is so cute.
yes, hopefully she'll be there the whole time and be nice and quiet.
Mm.
Yeah, I grew up in LA or Southern
Okay.
California, Westlake Village area, Thousand Oaks,
Okay.
Ventura
Yeah, that's my
County.
brother lives in Valley Village, which
Okay.
might not have been its own destination when you grew up, but
Yeah,
it's like right
I
near
remember the
Studio
name, but I don't
City,
think that was a big
that
deal. But
area. Yeah.
I mean,
They've carved
I'm
out
going
all
way back
these.
to the 80s. So
Yeah. Well, now there's so many mini neighborhoods for like real estate purposes.
it's a hard place, man. Like I feel like I loved growing up there, went away for college and just never came back. And my friends there and I go there from time to time. And now that I'm in Colorado and I'm feeling Colorado's getting crowded, like LA is overwhelming to me.
Yeah. We moved to Pasadena in 2021
Okay.
and we love it because it feels, I'm from the East, both my husband and I are from the East Coast, and it has an East Coast feel to it. It has a neighborhood feel. Like, our kids ride their bikes on the street with
Yeah.
all of our neighbors' kids. Like it has all of the culture of LA, but it has that kind of neighborhoody feel and sort
Yeah.
of it feels removed from LA in a really nice way.
Yeah.
So we actually we really love it. We
Where
love
in the,
Colorado too. We spend our summers there.
oh, whereabouts?
My parents have a little condo in Snowmass,
Oh, great.
so they're
Yeah.
very kind and let us
Yeah.
occupy it for
That's
like
a,
about 5 weeks every summer. We love it. Where in Colorado are you?
yeah. Boulder County. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, and we like going up to the mountains more in the summer. It's
Yeah,
just
it's
a
great
nice
in
kind of
summer.
getaway. And where in the East Coast did you grow up?
I grew up in the Philadelphia area.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law is
Yeah.
a big Eagles fan. So
Oh,
like to
so
the
is
point that
everyone
it's
in my
like just
family.
uncomfortable to be around kind of a thing.
Yeah. Philly
Um,
sports teams can break your heart for sure.
now, did you grow up a creative kid?
I think so. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, uh I've always wanted to be a writer, and I've always also been really like into crafts and things with my like working art with my hands. So yeah, some of my earliest memories are like sitting on my parents' typewriter and writing little stories. I
Oh,
think I even liked writing before I liked reading, which is probably not the way it's supposed to be, but
yeah. It's funny. Like, the second part of what you said about you crafts and just the idea, and I find this in myself a little bit. I like to just create. Like, yeah, whether it's a house project or whether it's writing a novel or whatever it is, like just, and it is, there's something also tactile about something other, like working with your hands. And I consider writing to be that. But it's funny for you that it so heavily went towards writing. Where do you think that, like, especially even before reading, because normally I talk to people that are like, oh, I was a bookworm and this and that. Was it the feeling of the typewriter? Was it the creative bursts?
yeah, I mean, I always like to admit that because I was a little slower to love reading, and I
Yeah.
think maybe hopefully that like is comforting to people who initially reading didn't always come easy to. But yeah, I think I've always just loved making up stories,
Yeah.
and it's been something that I've wanted to do for so long that I don't even know where it came from.
Yeah.
It just I just have always loved sort of being inventive and coming up with stories and
Yeah. And that's interesting about being slower to read. But, reading, is my not so secret kind of shame in terms of conversations with an author because, I read whatever I had to read at school. College was basically a business degree, zero works of fiction assigned to me in any class. Got into reading in my 20s. But you talk to other writers like, oh, I was influenced by X, Y, and Z, and it just that makes me feel, or I'm, obviously the people who were English majors or lit majors, and I always feel like I didn't do this right. And then you start to realize over time, it's like, well, I just like stories, whether I'm consuming them through books or through shows or through movies or through a friend telling a story. That challenge of figuring the story out, I think, is more important than the fact that you're exceptionally well read from a young age. I don't know. And you teach creative, right? So I'd be
yeah.
curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think, and I teach a variety of writing classes. I also teach some like mandatory writing classes that are more personal essay. So there's always that struggle of buy-in sometimes with general education classes. So I talk to students a lot about finding things that you're interested in, and I think that because I remember like I really started liking to read in high school when I read like Kurt Vonnegut and like even Cowgirls Get the Blues, Tom Robbins, like that kind of stuff. Because it was the first time where it was like, oh, I didn't realize books could be this, you know.
Yeah.
And I read some before that, but that was when I really got passionate about it. And I really just think it's that time in your life where you find a book that you really connect with.
Yeah.
Um, and also, what I tell my students a lot is it's not just, I mean, reading a lot is great, but it's also being like an active reader. So we talk a lot about reading like a writer, and sort of the two hats you have to wear if you're not only doing it for pleasure, but trying to learn from it.
Yeah. But don't you think, do you? I find myself gravitating almost exclusively to nonfiction in my personal pleasure reading. I think because of the whole reading like a writer, it becomes not that I not that it's easier to criticize, not that it's easier to be jealous or whatever it is. I think it's easier to just be pulled out of it because you're looking at the technique of it, and all of a sudden you're not as attached to the story, or maybe that's a reflection of the writing itself. I don't know. But do you have a sense of that now as an author and as a reader? Like, can you just immerse yourself in something similar to what you like a thriller like you just put out?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's nice because like what I teach and read for school is really different than what I read for pleasure. So
Yeah.
I get more of that literary like writing forward, and it's mostly nonfiction for school. We read a lot of like best American essays and stuff like that, or we
Yeah.
read short stories, which I don't read a lot in my free time anymore. um but uh yeah, I try to pay attention to how when I get sucked into a book, right? Because like, and then it's like I pull back and I'm like, well, what is it about this that did that? I would say the majority of what I listen to books more than I read them at this point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I have two little kids, and it'll take
Right.
me a month to read a physical book, but I can
Right.
listen to like three in a week.
Yeah.
And I also, that reading like a writer thing, I find audiobooks really helpful for that.
Hmm.
Sort of hearing them, they help me a lot with figuring out like what's essential to a story and what's not, and flow and things like that. So I think actually listening to audiobooks is like really transformed my writing in a good way. But yeah, I listen. I mean, I'm new to the like the thriller genre, so
Yeah.
and I only really started listening and reading to thrillers during the pandemic.
Hmm.
So I'm sort of playing catch up, and it's a lot of what yeah, it's a lot of my reading these days.
I that's fascinating. And your comments on audiobooks are interesting as well, because I think when you talk about thrillers, my biggest issue that I see with thrillers, especially if I'm working with a student, so people maybe who haven't been published yet, is just an excess of words. I mean, to put it as reductive as I can, whether those are the adverb dialogue tags or whether it's too much description. And I think when you're listening to an audiobook, that stuff really pops because it's taking, when we think about like watching a show, it's such a cheat code because a camera capture can give us so many words, replace so many words on the written page, right? Just one pan of a camera. But I think there's a lesson to be learned about that, particularly with thrillers, to learn how to be, pithy in your writing,
Yeah,
because that's how I think people are consuming things, either on audio or they just want thrillers that are propulsive. And it's so easy to just put in too much exposition or whatever. And I'm talking an extra paragraph. It doesn't take much to pull you
yeah.
out. So when you're sitting down to write your own thrillers, going back from having not written that before, did that help? Like, were you thinking about how it would be listened to, or is it's a different audience that might appreciate maybe more propulsion than kind of sitting with a description longer?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, because I would say my like three books before this one were more kind of women's fiction, commercial fiction, but I was always like focused on, and I think teaching and telling my students to pay attention to audience has really, really helped me think about the reader, and the reader's expectations. So I've always sort of been really focused on that and like trying to figure out like what is it in any book, and it's different in different genres, but that like makes you keep turning the page. Like
Yeah,
that's always been my goal in a book, is to get people to keep turning, even when
yeah,
it's not like the thriller propulsiveness. But I think when I like, I guess two things. Like one thing that really helped me, I am a long writer. Like the book I'm working on now, I've gotten it down to like 94,000 words, but at one point it was like 120,000 words, which I
yeah,
absolutely knew was too long. But it's nice that like thrillers are usually, I think I will always be on the upper end of this, but like 85 to 95,000 words. So I
yeah,
just kind of like, it's like, you have to get it down because
yeah,
readers don't want to. So like, I think the actual having like goals of word count cuts is really helpful. But when I'm stuck, my goal, but I've never had enough time to do this, is to read and record my entire book and then listen back to it while editing. But I've just never had time. But I will do that if I know a chapter is causing me trouble, or like I know it's too slow. I'll just
Right.
like I'll read it into my phone. And often I don't even need to listen back to it, because just in reading it aloud, I realize like, oh, I didn't need this part at all. So I
It's
do
so,
find that kind of
yeah.
a thing. Yeah.
And same thing. I always say I'm going to read this out loud, and I just never do because it's really, a massive time commitment. And then you're stopping to make a change. But even if I'm asked to do a reading and I just go and I start looking for a passage and I start kind of editing it down for time, I start, why didn't I just write it like this? This is so much better because there is a rhythm and a cadence, and sometimes when you're writing a really tense scene, you can hear that metronome increase in BPM. And you're like, yes, this is these staccato bursts. This is how it should, and then it kind of slows down a little bit. And I mean, for me, that took hundreds of thousands of words to kind of hear that rhythm
Mhm.
in a way that I could trust after a while. I just think it shows how you change as a writer with just building the muscle.
Yeah. And it is a muscle,
It
right?
is. It is.
Yeah.
Do your students appreciate that, very few people just write the very first thing as a wonderful work of genius, as opposed to, yeah, a lot of it is just training.
Yeah. Think I think if they buy it, they do. It's amazing how many, particularly in like more general education classes, like there's just people who come in and are like, I'm not a good writer. I don't like writing.
Right. I
And
have to take this class.
I can disabuse a lot of them to a certain extent, but I think it's hard to fully convince them that uh that nobody, I mean, some people have more talent than others naturally, but that nobody is like the finished product from the start. But I do tend to tell them, I'm trying to remember who said it, but like a mark of a writer is somebody who doesn't think they're a good writer. And I
Yeah.
think that self-doubt, right, is part of it. Um, One thing that I think also really helps is workshopping, because like outside of workshops, students never see each other's writing, so all they see is published work, and they
Right.
don't realize like where their peers are, and they also don't read the first draft of something that's published. So they have it's understandable that they have these unrealistic expectations of like how good writers are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, workshopping so for me, I was in a critique group for like 20 years and it's brutal. And it's so important. And I think and then I think once you're in that workshop, whatever form that takes, whether it's a coach, a mentor, an actual critique group, then you have to learn the skill of figuring out who to actually listen to, because not everyone gives good feedback. In fact, I would posit less than 25% give
Yes.
feedback that's really effective for what you are specifically writing.
Right.
And you just have to feel it's just a feeling over time. Somebody says something, you're like, yeah, that resonates with me. And that's like, for example, my relationship with my editor. I know when I finish a book, it's not done. It's the best I could do. And I know she is going to see stuff that I couldn't see for myself. And I trust her. And so I agree with 95% of what she says. But when you're just in a critique group, and if you make all the changes everybody says, you're going to have a worse book for it.
Yeah. Well, I always tell them that a lot of times people give advice for like the version of your story or the version of your essay that they would write. And
Yeah.
so it might be really good advice, but it's not the right advice for you. So I even like, I'm like, even so, I talk to them a lot about, which I learned from my screenwriting friends, this idea of like the note behind the note,
Yeah.
which screenwriters talk about a lot, which is like this idea that, maybe you don't agree with the feedback that you're getting, but trying to understand where it's coming from and like
Right.
because like what it's responding to might be right, even if the like diagnosis isn't right.
And I
Um,
think that also goes to the skill of being a good critiquer. And I think and that's something you learn over time too, because I think the tendency is what I see a lot of is somebody say, this is how you should do it, as opposed to this is how I received it. And you figure out if that's meaningful to you and then what to do with it. But to your point,
yeah,
someone immediately reasons like, oh, this is what I would have done with that. And that doesn't make it better. And it certainly doesn't make it the original vision, But if they can say, this just felt a little disappointing that this relationship didn't seem to go very far, that's great feedback because then it lets you take control.
Yeah. There's this book, Blue Angel, which I guess is a little old by now, by Francine Prose, which is about a workshop and an affair between like a student and a professor. And it starts in the workshop, and the like one of the students' story that they're workshopping has bestiality in it. And so all the other students are giving this one student advice about how to make like fucking the chicken more realistic. And then the and the professor's like in his head the whole time, he's like, just don't fuck the chicken. Just don't fuck the chicken. So I tell like a more like sanitized version of that story to my students a lot as sort of a shorthand for sometimes even when everybody thinks the same thing, it's like just don't fuck the chicken, right?
What I love is when we post these episodes, we have a pull quote that we use on social media to draw people in. And, you know, how can I not use that?
Yeah, which is funny because at this point in my life, I don't curse very much. When I had kids, I tried to
What?
like rein in the cursing. And
Oh, I
also,
think
I don't
I
know if
started
you've
cursing
ever,
more when I had kids.
oh, well, I think my first book, which was kind of a cozy, it wasn't really a mystery, but like a cozy novel. I used the F word a lot in it, and I got a ton of emails from readers, kind of being
Yeah.
like, "Shame on you for cursing in your book," and it just made me very conscious of when I
Yeah.
curse and when it's necessary and when it's not.
It, I actually have charted in an Excel spreadsheet my use of profanity over the course of 11 books just for my
Has it
own
grown
amusement.
or
Well, yeah, it crept up, and then it went down, and then it went way up. And I think it is you have to be true to your character, right? So in my case, I'm writing almost always first person present tense, the preponderance of the time a female point of view, a single point of view. And if I just picture this person and I'm like, this is just she's angry. I don't know why she's angry, but she's angry. Let's explore. There's going to be profanity. And my mom would always say, she's like, I just don't think women curse that much. And I'm like, my life is surrounded by women, and I can disabuse her of that notion very quickly as much as she wants to
right?
cling to it as a baby boomer. um, but other books, like, I had a 21-year-old female savant in 1987, and I'm like, there's just,
It's not,
she's
yeah.
kind of emotionless, so cursing doesn't do any good to her. So that book had very few instances of profanity. But yeah, you'll always annoy somebody. A cozy somebody, that's a slightly older, heavily female, and they're probably not going to want that as much. But you just get
Yeah.
a sense for it, I think, over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And you get thicker. I mean, I haven't like stopped. I mean, I think actually in my second book after that, I was like, I'm going to curse in this book because I was like, there's nothing, but yeah, it has to be true to the character. And it has to feel authentic. And be there for a reason, like any other word on the page.
Yeah, well, for sure. And speaking of that, I'm curious and I want to go through your writing history in just a minute, but I'm also very fascinated by the fact that you teach. Um, and you also teach classes that are required classes, to your point. I don't want to be here. I don't know how to write. I'm not good at this. And now you're challenged with AI, obviously. That's got to be a huge thing for you, I'm assuming. How do you sniff that out?
Yeah, so it's, I mean, not only that, but a lot of universities, USC included, have uh, made an agreement with ChatGPT. So there's actually an academic version of it that the
Oh,
students all get a free and faculty get a free account to. And I think it's,
that's
it's the
smart, actually. You're
reality.
leaning into it.
Yeah, and it depends on the field. Like, I think the biggest thing is like I mean, my students honestly are so sick of talking about AI
Yeah, yeah,
because they're doing it in all their classes. But the problem is if it's sanctioned by the school, right, you have to have really clear limitations
yeah.
of how you can use it. I have found like, so I teach some classes on publishing. Sometimes I teach creative writing, and I teach also some general education classes. So my classes that are for students that want to be writers, we don't really talk about it that much
Yeah.
because
It's
they
just
all
kind of
want
assumed.
they want to
Yeah.
foster their own voices.
Right.
I show them. There's this thing that came out maybe 2 years ago in the New York Times where Curtis Sittenfeld wrote a story. Like she was given a prompt by her editor, and AI was given a prompt by her editor, and they both wrote a story like in the style of thousand-word story in the style of Curtis Sittenfeld. And it's so obvious which one is better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I give that to them and we talk about it and like talk about what AI can do and what it can't do. But where it comes up more is sort of in those mandatory classes. And it really just depends on the students. But what I found is since they're all workshopping each other's work, I have them set the AI policy. So we talk about it first, and then they get to decide. We do an exercise where I have them edit their own work, and then I have AI edit their own work. And I'm
Yeah.
like, is it useful? And I'm like, not only is it useful at making your writing sound better, but is it useful in teaching you something to make yourself a better writer?
Right. Right.
And they usually say like 80% no, it like sounds better, but it takes strips the meaning, or like it's helpful for a sentence but not for a paragraph, that kind of thing.
Totally.
um
Yeah.
so I let them kind of arrive there on their own, and then at the end of the day, it's I think for a while I was like optimistic that the shame of having your peers read your work if it's AI created would be enough to get people not to do it, and I'm not sure that's true. But at the end of the day, like it's an honor system.
Yeah.
And I know
Right.
some of my colleagues think they're really good at spotting AI. I don't necessarily think I am.
But you get
But
in what you get out what you put in terms of whether you're going to
yeah,
use it or not.
yeah, and we try to talk about too, like what is the point of a general education program, and what is the point of a class like this? And like, it's like if you're not here to learn, then what are you here
Well, what's the
for?
point?
Yeah, and I get it. There's lots of reasons they have to be there, but yeah, I just try my best to like have them buy into it. And I also we do all like personal narratives, so I guess some people would, but I'm like, do you really want AI to write your story, like your story of your own life? That
Right.
feels, I don't
Right.
know, I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, and I think, but to be fair, there is a learning potential with it. So, for example, when I get my copy edits back from a human, I learn because I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Because I'm not sitting here writing and looking at Chicago Manual of Style, right? So when they change things, I'm like, that's a learning possibility for me. So now I
Yeah.
know whatever. If you have AI edit something, and I'm not talking about necessarily flow, I'm talking about actual, almost kind of copy editing, looking for, you can learn. And that's a great opportunity. But you also have to have a foundation of confidence as a writer to know, if it is looking at things stylistically, whether it resonates. It's not necessarily right. Does it
Yeah.
resonate with you? And you have to have years of experience in order to make that determination. If you're just starting out and you're having AI give you feedback on your plot, I think that's very dangerous.
Yeah. And it's interesting because if you read something, in my experience, that AI has written, like it sounds good at first. And you're like, oh, this is kind of scary how good it is. But like the more you read, you realize it doesn't actually
A
make
lot of
sense. And
empty
yeah.
calories.
Hmm.
Yeah, like a lot of genre speak. I've seen it where like, yeah, there'll be a sentence that like, oh, you know, he walked into the house and it was dark, too dark. And I'm like, okay, what does too dark even mean? Like, like
Right.
there's a lot of genre stuff like that that sounds like it should be in a thriller, but it doesn't, or it
If
doesn't
you
just
scratch
mean
at it,
anything.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, I was somebody showed me an example the other day, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but something about like, oh, the way he said this landed really hard. And I'm like, who writes landed hard? Like, what does that actually mean when like, it's not
Yeah.
very plain spoken. And I think people appreciate just like what's, direct and to the point, or heavy use of similes that just don't really, it sounds
Yeah.
okay. And you read again, like, wait, what does that mean? And the second something is distracting, when you stop as a reader to say, what does that mean? Especially with a thriller, you're
You're pulled
lo-
out.
you're pulled out.
Yeah.
And like a 3-second being pulled out of something it's actually a lot of time, especially if it's happening once per page or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
go ahead.
And I will say, like, with that, I mean, having learned a little bit more about it, like, the more I've read, it's like the people who understand AI the most are the least afraid of it. And I always try to sort of remember that. Like, I don't think it's gonna, I mean, it is obviously a problem at replacing a lot of entry level jobs in certain
Totally.
fields. Um, but I don't worry about it in a, you know, there's other bigger threats to read it, like people reading books than AI to me, which is, you know, so I don't
Yeah,
worry about it in like a grand way. But with students, you know, it's hard. And what I've really found is that like even the most conscientious of students, they use it for things that they're not invested in. And so you just have to make them invested and want to do it themselves,
right,
which
right.
might be
And
easier said than done.
right. And I think that all kind of distills down to the essence of why are you writing to begin with? If you're writing because you're in a general education class and you have to, that's one thing. If you want to be a writer, there has to be a passion, there has to be a joy, there
Yeah.
has to be some kind of unquenchable thirst in there that takes you through all how hard it is all the time to write, because it never gets that much easier. It's always, for me, it's always really hard. It's always this mountain. Every novel's a mountain. Um,
Very
but
true.
if not for that joy of discovery of that, oh my God, what if this happens? That came out of just all those words sitting in your subconscious is finally kind of bubbling to the surface, then I wouldn't do it at all. So, and I think that joy weeds out a lot of people because they realize, like, you know what, if I'm being honest, I don't really like this all that much. I like the idea of it and I like the challenge of it, but the day-to-day slug of it, if there's not some kind of joy there, then it's like exercise. You'll eventually give up.
Yeah,
I think. But now, so for
I
you,
agree.
before you wrote your first psychological suspense novel, which just came out, you had three other books, very well received. You were on a path to be the writer that you wanted to be before you were even reading that much as a little kid. Did you ever waver from that path? That's what you studied in school? You didn't have any kind of common sense to like get a real job or anything?
Um, I mean, teaching's my real job. I
True.
always had it. I mean, I always knew I was going to have a day job, and I'm glad that I do.
And that's a
Yes
huge
and
awareness to have, by the way, because a lot
yeah,
of people don't realize like it's tough to be a writer. You better have other
yeah.
plans.
Well, I think which is why I try to tell my students, like I try to be as transparent with my students as possible about the life of being a writer and the process and stuff. Because until I published my first book, like even in grad school, I don't really think I knew what it was to be a writer. So it never occurred to me. Like the goal was always to try to publish a book, but like after that, I didn't know what being a professional writer looked like, and I don't think I ever thought that it was something I would make a living off of,
Right.
which maybe helped. But yeah, I mean, I always sort of studied, like when I was in college, I was an English major. I was also an anthropology major because I was like, not, I don't think I thought that would ever lead to a job, but I was interested in it. And my parents always, which I realize is a lot of privilege, they always just encouraged me to follow my interests. So they didn't, I mean, I realized at some point that I wasn't as like practical about some things as I should be, but like they're like, you know, you like to write, etc. For uh follow that passion. I mean, for a little while, I got very, which is part of my new book. After college, as a hobby, a very extensive hobby. I did a lot of jewelry making,
Mm-hmm.
and for a little while, I was trying to figure out if I could like do that as a job, but that's even less practical than being a writer. Um,
Having your own Etsy store, I don't know. You could probably do pretty well.
it's a lot of, I was doing everything by hand, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot of hours.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a boring story, but like yeah, I always was sort of very focused after college. Well, I had an internship at a literary agency, and then I took off for 2 years. I taught snowboarding in Colorado
Oh,
for 2 seasons, and I lived in Mexico for a little while and was studying with a silversmith. So like I very much, I think my dad
you're a
is a
Renaissance
lawyer.
woman.
I don't sure, but my dad is a lawyer, and I think when and he went, you know, granted it was the 70s, but late 60s, 70s. He went straight from college to law school. And I think he always regretted not taking a little time off before just like becoming a professional. So he was always very encouraging of me, like in my 20s, I worked a lot of waiting tables jobs.
Yeah.
Like have fun while you can. Like you'll never regret this time when you're older. And I really didn't. I mean, I was in Colorado and then I was in Mexico and then I went back to New York and was like, okay, if I want to be a writer, I need to understand the business. So I worked at a literary agency for about 2 years before grad school. And that was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I
If not
understand royalty
disheartening, I would
statements.
think, because you're
Um,
going through slush piles. You're probably seeing like the odds of even getting an agent,
yeah.
much less selling a book.
Yeah, I didn't find it disheartening though,
Oh, that's good.
strangely. I found it very stressful.
Yeah. I
It
believe that
was,
too.
yeah, it was also the era where like you still sent everything by messenger. And so I was just like constantly worried about like at first I didn't understand like that because the databases we used weren't totally current. So like I would send something to an editor, they're old imprints. And so I was just like so afraid of I felt a little like devil wears Prada. I was so afraid of making a mistake. Um uh but it's funny though, because then like I went to grad school and when I graduated and wrote my first book and was ready to find an agent, I felt like I forgot everything that I learned from that experience.
Hmm.
And was sort of starting over from scratch. But I think the big thing it taught me is like this because I think in college a lot you want to be like a literary writer, right? And like that's the only thing that's like esteemed or whatever. But I think what working in publishing really taught me is that it's a business and like if someone's gonna publish your book, it has to be something that somebody else wants to read. And so that
Right.
was sort of the start of really focusing on this idea of reader expectations.
Right. And which are constantly in flux. And was that idea of analyzing reader expectations at all linked to your decision to write psychological suspense?
um huh, Probably. I'm trying to think of a good answer for that. I
Or
think
what
I
was
just,
the impetus? Like what went off in your brain?
yeah.
Or was it just I have a
Um,
story I want to tell?
no, I mean, with every book, I like to create a different challenge for myself
Sure.
that sometimes is obvious to the reader and sometimes isn't. And I think I found myself, like I was saying, my first book, it was like a literary scavenger hunt set in a bookstore. And I didn't realize I was writing a cozy book. And at least in my experience in publishing, once you have something that like does well, they want you to stay in
Right.
your
Right.
lane. And and it wasn't the lane I wanted to be in.
Right.
And then I think I wasn't like sure what lane I wanted to be in, but like every book after that had sort of a mysterious element. And then during the pandemic, I started listening to a lot of thrillers and was just really struck by when a story surprised me. Because I'm
Yeah.
pretty good at guessing things, and
Yeah.
it would always really impress me. So it's like I want to try that. And then, and also all of my books had, I think, death in them before this one. So maybe I
Yeah.
was like, I just feel like I was like,
Right.
like subconsciously always writing toward psychological suspense. And I really like plot, I've realized as a writer. So it kind of
Hmm.
just sort of organically moved that way. And I'm finishing up my second one and my second psychological suspense. This one's more thriller, I think. I just really like it. I like the challenges of it. I think it's way harder than readers would realize to write a book that surprises people, that keeps them reading, that has twists and turns.
Yeah, totally. And for me, it's very important that because I don't outline, I don't go into the book with an expectation of this is all that's going to happen. And so a lot of times I'm thinking like maybe there's no twist. I have no idea. It's just this is what
Do you know
happens
the
next.
end,
No,
or
I don't
you
know
just
anything. I
totally
don't
got?
know.
Oh,
I
wow.
can barely see past the headlights. And you get a sense over time of like something needs to happen or there needs to be more physical movement. They need to go somewhere or whatever it is, if it's starting to feel a little bit too insulated. Um, but I'm never sitting there thinking like, all right, I'm 63% in. This is where the twist should be. But inevitably that happens. Inevitably, I'll be writing. All of a sudden, this out of my brain, it's just like, well, what if this person just opened this door and then there was this? I'm like, holy shit, what would that mean? And that doesn't mean it's the right answer, but those things start,
But it gets you moving. Yeah.
yeah, they start popping up around the 60% mark, I'd say,
Oh,
maybe around
interesting.
60,000 words. And and it's funny, I was talking with my agent about my book coming out in November, and she said there's a major twist in it. And she's like, and I kind of said, like, yeah, I thought of that around 50,000 words. She's like, you didn't know that the whole time? I'm like, no, I just thought the book was kind of feeling boring. And then it just, this what if occurred to me. And that's just the value of your subconscious. Just like, I think for us pantsers, for, it's just trust that it's there, and don't try to force it, because I don't know if you outline, but I can't, my brain just doesn't work. I'm so impressed with people who can just see the whole structure.
Yeah, I know. I have a couple of thriller friends who really plot out everything. I'm sort of somewhere in between. I think when I moved to LA, I think like every writer, I was like, oh, maybe I'll do some screenwriting.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized, for many reasons, but one reason that I didn't really like it is that you have to outline everything so extensively that I
Yeah.
felt like when I would start to write, I was bored, like it
Yeah.
was stale already.
Right.
So I have realized, like, my first book, I often think of it as like my first and second, because a lot of people I know wrote two books in the time that I wrote that book. It's just because I constantly was rewriting it. And I think I managed to write like a whole draft with nothing happening, like, because I didn't know there was like a secret at the core of it, and I didn't know what the secret was. So I found, for me, I always need to know, like, I need to know where it starts, and I need to more or less know where it ends, and then I kind of get there along the way.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So it's
Yeah.
always have a destination.
The only thing I'll know about the destination is what can't happen. Like what would feel cheap or what would feel
Yeah.
unearned. And that's all just kind of a gut instinct that you get over time. But in terms of what actually happens, I never know. And then it's funny, like you mentioned the word count earlier. I'm always like, my first draft is almost always at around 85,000 words.
Hmm.
And I'm not planning that. It just happens. And when you're writing the ending, I don't know what the ending is, but particularly like the epilogue or the last chapter after, the kind of the critical, end. It's, if you feel kind of emotional writing it, and then it just like, oh, so this must be the ending, because I feel it viscerally somehow, even though maybe it's not a lot happening on the page. It just feels like I'm breathing for the first time. And I'm like, okay, so this is the end, I guess. And that's all I have to go on, is that instinct. And it's hard to develop that. It takes a lot of time and, confidence, which is very hard to come by. It took me years and years and years to even call myself a writer, much
Yeah.
less trust my own writing. Do you feel like you're in a place now where you're just, you're working on book two? And I assume this is also your Thomas and Mercer, right? Is that correct? Yeah.
Hmm.
So book two, and I've heard great things about Thomas and Mercer, by the way.
Yeah, I've been so happy there.
I was just talking to Simon Gervais, who's been with them for a long time.
Oh yeah, I think he has the same editor as I do.
Oh,
Liz.
interesting. Yeah,
I
he's a
think
friend of
so.
mine. We see each other at Thriller Fest, and he's just a good guy. But do you feel that, okay, book two, again, it's just your second book of psychological suspense, but you've written a lot. Uh, I know what I'm doing. It feels good. Not that you're flawless. We never are, but are you at a place of confidence where you're like, yeah, I think this is my voice. This is who I am.
As much as writing is like exercise, I think it's also like having children. You
You
have
forget.
to you have to forget everything. Yeah, I mean that's not really true, because I think what I've learned is like to make decisions quicker. And once I make a decision, I don't know if it's the same as instinct, but to just like go with it, right?
Yeah,
If it doesn't work, wait till later.
right.
But just go with it. Don't second guess your decisions, because that's how you end up like in the mud. I don't I I think I think it's like every time I sit down to start a new book, I'm just like, how, and that's not true. Like the water lies came to me pretty quickly.
Hmm.
I'd been thinking about it for a few years before I started writing, so I think that helped.
Right.
And some books are just like that. Like my second book was like that too. Like some of them just like come to you, they're sort of fully formed. The one I'm working on right now, because it's like 5 points of view.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
That's
yeah,
challenging.
it's been really it's so challenging that I never got into like the flow of it. So I was like, this is either great or terrible, and I
Right.
cannot tell.
Right.
And I was like, I think there's, you have to trust yourself. I was like, I think there's something here. But no, I think also it's like once you have books out there, if you I sort of stop there. I like for the first like 100 reviews or so, we'll like read them on Goodreads and then I stop.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. You
but
want
then
to
you
get a
get like
pulse.
readers, yeah, and it's hard because I think with genre fiction, it's like you have to pay attention to what readers want because it's all so then you start getting them in your head. So I think I had like confidence that I could create turns that were surprising. Although, you always get some people who are like, I saw this from page one.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, it really felt every book has different challenges in it. And like
Yeah.
but I do think it's like everyone, even though I'm like, how am I going to do this? I'm like, but I've done this like X number of times
Right.
before. I can do it. And
Right.
that's sort of the confidence that gets you through it. But yeah, this new one was, but I wanted to make it. I was like, okay, I figured out how to write a pretty like straightforward suspense book. I want to write something more complicated now. And
Yeah.
then halfway through, it's like, why did I make this so
Right. Right. I
complicated?
don't know how this all resolves. How this is going to be like the Lost series finale at the end, where it's going to like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. I know it's very easy to make it too complicated, but that's also the puzzle solving. The internal puzzle solving is part of the thrill of like, oh my God, I've written myself into a corner.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're willing to just gut a lot of it and not trying to force keep everything that you've already written, but knowing that's also a possibility. The idea of how does this all tie? How does this all satisfy? It's exciting to me. Like
Yeah.
it's because it is a big puzzle, and that's I think is the most interesting part.
Yeah. And I don't outline, but I'm a really big fan of what I call a reverse outline. So once I have a draft, then I'll like outline from the draft to see
Okay.
like what's there, what needs to go. I'll make an arc. Like I'll do it after I have a draft already to
Yeah.
figure out what's in the wrong place and like what doesn't need to be there. And
Right.
like also by bullet points, really see like is each chapter progressing, what's happening.
Right. Because I think if you do that, I think that's great advice. Because if you do, for me, if I try to think about all that stuff as I'm writing the draft, I get stopped. If you're starting to think about a hero's journey or, a 3-act book or a proper arc, if you just trust yourself to just let it just come, and it's going to be a mess, and also make sure that you're willing to just really do a lot of hard work in the editing, then if you see it kind of as a whole and can be objective about it, then you can make those tough decisions later. But there's so much goodness that came out of that instinct that you
Mhm.
didn't try to force into some kind of, agreed upon structure, that I think that's what makes it organically much more of an interesting book and probably a better voice.
Yeah.
So, well, we are going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going
Mhm.
to do our own little storytelling. So I have this is my signed book edition version of Making It Up. I've got 3 books. Um, you're going to choose one of them. We're going to choose a random
Okay.
sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that'll be the first sentence in a very, very short story. We'll just alternate sentences
I know
until
I've never done I've listened to yours, but I've never done anything like this before.
so
So
if
we'll
you've
see how
heard
it
them,
goes.
it goes off the rails very quickly.
Yeah.
So it takes there's that's what takes all the pressure off, is knowing that it's going to be it's going to be not great no matter what happens. I've got Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones, The Last Mrs. Parrish, Liv Constantine, and Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl. So choose one
Um,
of those.
I guess we should do the first one because I haven't read that one. But
So
I've read the other
Mongrels,
two.
yeah, Mongrels is great. Um, so give me a page between 1 and 300.
137.
Okay, I'm going to quickly scan 137. Mostly dialogue.
We can start our story with dialogue.
Yeah,
No?
totally. Yeah, we can. Yeah, no, I actually prefer it. Um, all right, you do whatever you want with this. Make make believe is important, he said.
All right, hold on. Okay, good. Make believe is important, he said. Let's just go with uh, to a classroom of eager students.
Yeah, Jeremy thought, sitting as far back in the classroom as he could. But I want to write about things that are real. I want to write about stuff everyone else would think was made up, but I know for a fact happened. I have the scars to show it.
So I tuned out the professor as he continued to ramble about make believe and wrote down my dark past.
I didn't care if he saw me writing. I'd already gotten into enough trouble that I don't think it even mattered anymore. I knew the first sentence had to be good, had to be really good. And all I could think of was all the blood that I saw when I was 13. How would I put that into a sentence?
It was so much blood. I'm just laughing because I'm thinking, like, what if my colleagues walk by right now? It was so much blood that I slipped in it and it seeped through my shirt.
That's a great first line, I decided, writing it down. And then I went back and I closed my eyes and I really tried to think, laying there in all that liquid, of everything else that I felt in the moment. And the one thing that bubbled to the surface was how, when that single drop of blood landed on my tongue, it reminded me how desperately hungry I was.
And as she stood over me, I feared I might never eat again.
Oh, I think we call it there. We got a whole new character. All of a sudden, there, I want to read that
Yeah.
story.
Yes. Although I don't think that's a good first line, like seep through your shirt. As soon as I said it, I was like, I can come up with something
You
better
are a
than
true
that.
writer. You immediately
Immediately
critiquing
start
yourself.
editing.
Well, Amy, what a pleasure talking with you. Are you
Yeah, thanks.
hitting any of the thriller, suspense, mystery
I
conferences
am
this
gonna
year?
go to Thriller Fest for the first time this year. I'm very excited.
Oh, right on. Are you? So I'm curious. You're obviously you're not a debut, but sometimes when you switch genres, I don't know if Thomas Mercer is treating you as a debut. I work with the debut authors at Thriller Fest.
Okay. Yeah, I just sort of signed up on my own. I feel like I don't know how I know some publishers are really involved in Thriller Fest. I don't know, like I know I've heard Source Books has a great party.
They do, and I know
That's
Thomas
the word on the
Mercer is a
street.
big name at Thriller Fest for sure. So if
Yeah.
you're interested in the debut thing, just because
Okay, yeah, because
there's
I
a
read the
dinner,
like
there's a breakfast.
qualifications and I didn't think I qualified
Yeah, I'm not
based
sure.
on
I'm not
yeah.
sure how
And
they
it's
would treat
weird
it.
because like I also didn't ask them. I don't think they submitted my book for because it came out January 1st.
Oh, okay. So it would
It's
be next year.
yeah, but I'm really excited. I've heard it's
Oh, well,
very
I will
fun.
see. I'm there from like
Yeah.
Tuesday through Sunday. So, because I'm teaching at Craft
I
Fest.
guess it
So,
was I'm going to the Tucson Book Festival and
right
this
on.
woman is arranging a like mystery and thriller writer dinner. And I was when I was emailing with her, I was like, everyone I've met in this world is so nice. And she was like, yeah, the saying is it's the thriller writers are nice, it's the children's book authors you have to worry about.
Oh, I
Which
always
I don't
hear it's
actually
the
think is
romance
true, but
authors.
maybe both. Maybe just yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, everyone it's my friends and I often laugh that like it's not the people you think who
No,
write
the thriller
thrillers.
writers are the most generous, selfless, loving people. Like I've made
Yeah,
so many friends. It's amazing. So, well, I will see you in May then. That'll be awesome.
great.
All
Looking
right.
forward to it.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay,
Take care.
bye.
Bye. That is it. That is my conversation with Amy Meyerson, ending on a story, as they often are, coated in blood. I don't know why. It always goes so dark. I am probably to blame for most of that. I'd have to go back and watch the episodes to know. Am I the first one who just introduces something terrible happening? God damn it. I think I probably am. All right. Well, I guess that's telling enough. Amy, if you want to find out everything about her new book, The Water Lies, or about Amy in particular, go to her website, just amymeyerson.com. And pop on over to carterwilson.com if you're interested in my books, my newsletter, other episodes of Making It Up, all that good stuff. Or if you're interested in any kind of writing coaching, head on over to my company, unboundwriter.com. That's it. That's it for this episode of Making It Up. It was a good one. Another episode out just next week. Thank you, as always, for listening. In the meantime, take care.